And now for more on this developing situation, it's a pleasure to welcome Ambassador Dennis Ross, Counselor and Davidson Distinguished Fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy and author of Statecraft 2.0, What America Needs to Lead in a Multipolar World, joining us live from Washington as well. Ambassador, thank you so much for your time. So the Israeli cabinet is deciding as we speak on plans to take full control of Gaza, but the Prime Minister has already spoken to Fox News and said the plan is to remove Hamas but not keep Gaza. He wants to pass the territory onto Arab forces, according to that interview. Nothing official yet. Your reaction to what we've just heard?
Well, if he wants to achieve the handover to Arab forces, if he wants to take over all of Gaza so it's not a permanent occupation, which I think it certainly makes sense that Israel not become an occupier again of Gaza, then what he's going to need to do is ensure, I think, several things. Number one is he has to have a very clear endpoint. How much control is enough? Number two, the humanitarian situation will have to be addressed, meaning there will have to be a huge amount of humanitarian assistance going in at the same time. And number three, you're not going to be able to hand it over to Arabs unless you've reached some understandings with them over what the circumstances are that would make it possible for them to come in. So in effect, what I'm saying is the objective that the Prime Minister is laying out could be achievable, but it needs to be accompanied by a number of things. And it starts with having a very clear endpoint. You're not going to get rid of every single Hamasnik. So how much is enough? And you do need understandings with those who would come in. So you need to understand what it is, what are the circumstances under which they could come in. And this can't take place in an environment where the humanitarian situation looks as bad as it does right now.
It raises so many questions that have been asked in recent months over the day after, and who potentially could be in charge of the Gaza Strip. Your thoughts on exactly that? The more moderate Arab nations that might play a role, which kind of Palestinian leader, if any, could be in charge? Your sense, your insights?
Well, I would like to see several things. Number one, I'd like to see some kind of interim administration that would be created with a kind of Arab umbrella that would include the Emiratis, the Egyptians, maybe the Jordanians, maybe the Saudis, with some stabilization force, law and order capability as well. That's number one. Number two, there has to be a Palestinian participation in this. These countries, by the way, won't come in simply because Bibi is asking. They won't respond to him, but they will respond if the PA invites them in. And I think there probably has to be some level of PA participation, but there needs to be also genuine Palestinian Authority reform, not rhetorical, but real. And I think there needs to be a Palestinian project manager who works under this umbrella or this committee. And I think that project manager needs to be someone who has credibility internationally, someone like a Salam Fayyad, someone who has experience in international organizations like the World Bank or the IMF, someone who is capable of being a manager, someone who would work with the international community and with the Arabs. I think if you had an Arab committee, basically, that is overseeing this, has a Palestinian manager that has some kind of stabilization force or law and order capability that may include some Arab forces, but also maybe some credible sort of security people who are brought in. In some cases, it could be private organizations that are doing this. I think that represents what could be the day after. You have to get to the day after, and the point I was making in response to your earlier question, if Prime Minister Netanyahu wants to lay out this as an approach where Israel takes over all of Gaza and then hands it over, that could make sense, but he has to have a very clear definition of how much control is enough. And he's going to have understandings with the Arabs, or he will have no one to turn this over to.
And as you say, this is a question for when the region gets to the day after. Right now, as we speak, Israelis are waiting to find out about the fate of 50 hostages still in terror captivity. It's exactly 22 months to the day since the 7th of October. It's too risky for the IDF to try and conduct rescue missions for fear of what captors might do to the hostages. And we've all seen those harrowing pictures of hostages, Eviatar David and Rombas Rastli. Time is of the essence. It's very clear. What do you think Israel needs to do right now to get the hostages back home, realistically?
Well, realistically, the only thing that has produced the bulk of the hostage releases has been an agreement. Hamas is clearly not prepared for a partial agreement. Hamas, has consistently said the war has to end. Now, the approach that Israel now appears to be taking doesn't seem to be geared towards explicitly saying the war ends, although in a sense, maybe what the prime minister is saying is, once we've taken over Gaza, the war can end. But here again, what remains of Hamas? It's hard to see how militarily you're going to rescue the hostages. This approach seems to be a kind of frustration with the inability to negotiate a partial deal, a ceasefire for 60 days. And so maybe this approach is also designed simply to put enough pressure on Hamas in the hopes that will produce at least a partial release. My own view all along has been, if you declare an end to the war, provided the hostages are released, which is what Hamas says would be required, and you make it clear that if Hamas tries to reconstitute itself, Israel will go in and respond, which no one will question, and you work with the Arabs on an alternative to Hamas, because you can't end the war ultimately without an alternative to Hamas. That seems to me to be a more promising way. The prime minister's approach right now doesn't focus on explicitly declaring an end to the war, but by saying Israel will turn over Gaza to basically to an alternative leadership. Israel can't create that alternative leadership. So it really does need the Arabs, and it really does need the Arabs to make any strategy work. And if it's not addressing the humanitarian situation at the same time, it'll have a very hard time getting the Arabs to play any such role. So to say this is complicated is an understatement. As you said, here we are 2 months, here we are right now 2 months short of 2 years, which seems incredible. And the fact that there are still 20 hostages who are alive, but in clearly desperate shape, that ought to be a preoccupation of whatever is done.
And as we all know too well in this part of the world, it is Hamas that has refused the latest proposal for some kind of a ceasefire or hostage release deal. Very briefly, we were talking earlier on in the show about the role that President Donald Trump has had so far on developments in this war. In the beginning of the year, he said if the hostages weren't returned, all hell would break loose. That hasn't happened as such. What kind of role do you see Donald Trump playing right now in this region? Your thoughts very briefly, please.
Sure. Look, I think all hell has broken loose if you look at what's the realities in Gaza, and Hamas doesn't care. Hamas is ready to sacrifice all the Gazans. They treat the Gazan population as if they're willing to be martyrs, but they never asked them if they want to be martyrs. So that's number one. Number two, I think the question is, how much patience does President Trump have? Again, I think if Prime Minister Netanyahu is talking about taking over Gaza, if this is open-ended, I think he will lose President Trump in the process. And at some point, President Trump's likely to say enough is enough.
We so appreciate your insights. As you say, so many questions. Difficult to believe that it is 2 months short of 2 years since the start of this war, a war started by Hamas on the 7th of October. Ambassador Dennis Ross, live from Washington, thank you so much for your insights and your time.
My pleasure.
Heartbreaking.